Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Nëïgsëndöïg Cöcülës show. My name is Nëïgsëndöïg Cöcülës, the namesake with this here podcast. I want to cover something that is absolutely atrocious. The Boomer-Zoomer divide. In other words, the divide between Generation Z or Generation Z and the baby boomers. Now, this divide is seen as a ritual forcing conformity on people who simply cannot conform. Now, this is for psychological reasons I don't know if I can even get into. I will say that I have a bullspit filter tuned to filter out a specific religious form of kabuki theater. Now, if you listen to the wavelength version of this episode, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Regardless, most of the issues, so the Zoomers say at least, do come from boomers. Now, we may be onto something, though we just have a different lens and a different life experience than the Gen Xers or the millennials, the boomers, the silents. It doesn't matter. In real time, in my experience at least, in my 23, almost 24 years of life, I have seen the arrogance of older people who are stuck in the past on quite a few different ideals. Not just boomers, by the way. These were ideals found to be incompatible with the modern day. You either need to reform them or you need to throw them out entirely. Most of these ideals come from the Enlightenment, which has been proven to be philosophically dark. Vox Day. Hopefully you're listening to this podcast. You were correct about it. I researched this myself. Regardless, as a ticked off Zoomer myself, I have seen the price increases on things. I know, even if we have multiple jobs, which, yeah, that's just overworking us, we're unable to pay for anything. We're unable to save. We can't do anything. Even if we do not get ourselves into luxury poverty, which is a thing us Zoomers do, by the way, even that, most of our money is being sent to a specific religious building that was constructed with money extorted from us. I was a member by proxy of this cult behind it until the age of 22. For myself, I have seen the arrogance, the absolute stubbornness, the hard-headedness of the conformists. They are usually older than us, not just seemingly out-of-touch boomers stuck in the past. In some cases, even Generation Z is doing some sort of conformity, but with a different ism than what the boomers, the zennials, and the millennials have had. Most advice, we can take it. But if we test this advice, we find out it actually doesn't work that way anymore. It's all psychological bullspit warfare. Us Zoomers tend to have zero respect for boomers who don't see our hardships and brush them off as fringe or conspiratorial. Unlike boomers, some of whom, and many of whom in fact, are stuck in the past, many of us Zoomers are stuck in the future. In other words, boomers can be depressed on average, Zoomers can be anxious on average. But we have a lot more problems as Zoomers have. Now, it's all a medical issue and forced to us by those whom I call out in bonus episodes 3 through 6. That we just need more vitamins B1 and B3. Thiamine and niacin. That's what it is. It is a deficiency in thiamine and niacin. We need more of those in our diet. Hence, why I am on a carnivore diet. I've been on a carnivore diet for a little while now, and I've been way better since. Regardless, we see the decline of conformity, even though we conform to something else. It's incompatible with everything older generations used to stand for and still do to a certain extent. This is why we are seen as being out of touch with these times, even though we can learn from boomers, from zennials, and from millennials. We are unable to do this because we seem to have rose colored glasses on, us Zoomers specifically. The other elephant in the room is that us Zoomers have basically been trained, badly trained, to be the next generation of that disgusting cult in which I call out. If you call for us to be a member of that cult I call out in bonus episodes 3 through 6, you can't get us to do that. We will become heretics, just like you. It is incompatible with what was practiced 3,000 to 5,000 years ago. Point blank, carte blanche. Now, what sparked this discussion, what sparked this entire thing, was that I had a heated discussion with Jack Spirko after I gave him some respectful feedback on episode 3861 of the Survival Podcast. Now, if you are listening on YouTube, I am not going to go through this entire thing. What I will do, however, is cover the entire thing on Wave Lake. Sorry, Jack. I wanted to get this out there and explain my reasoning as to why I did this. So I'll go ahead and move on unless you're on the Wave Lake version. So we'll have a separate version made. So I'll see you then either way. All right, all that is done and dusted. Now, that heated discussion that I had, this was all for feedback I was giving in that episode. It made me realize that I needed to do some more research on the boomer-zoomer divide. I decided to go deeper using AI. Jack and I could never have imagined how much worse this is. It's fake. Well, it's a real divide, but it's exaggerated. It is a religious ritual from a certain religious institution. And again, I call this out in bonus episodes 3 through 6. There were, in fact, multiple instances of boomers learning from zoomers and vice versa, and getting along extremely well as a result. We were able to quash the divide this way. That is because this divide was entirely in our heads from mainstream media sources. And the sexuality of the ones running these, it's disgusting. Us Zoomers, Generation Z, we saw right through this. We started to look for alternatives, only to then be found with the same people on the other side. Duality, which is garbage. Big tent bullspit is what that is. Now, I have heard the stat saying that 60% of baby boomers were living below the poverty line. Jack, I looked this up with AI. That stat doesn't exist. It has a fluke in it, and it looks to be intentional. It is from a specific religious organization who wanted to quash our noticing of international deceit. By the way, Jack, I am a partial space laser Jew penguin who notices what's being done under the command of this specific cult. And the 3 prevailing modern day isms, they come from that cult. From a 2023 census study, only 11.1% of Zoomers lived below the poverty line, while 10.1% of boomers lived below the poverty line in that same study. Now, could that have been from a different census study? I am not entirely sure. But from what I was able to research, this looks to be fake. That stat, 60% of boomers. This is for being below the median income. That is not poverty. This is unless I am missing something that I need to research. The stats for Generation Z happen to be from organizations like PRRI, the Annie E. Casey Foundation, and Barna. The 60% language, which is what Jack claimed, likely came from a UNICEF cutoff for cross-country child poverty comparisons. That is a mix-up for 60% median income, rather than 60% of the total boomer population here in America. In 2014, Miles Croak was able to find that 60% language, and it likely applied to younger Generation Z or Generation Alpha to a certain extent. This is from a 2012 study from UNICEF, though, so I can't seem to find that recent study talking about the 60% of boomers living below the poverty line. That seems to be misleading. In other words, that number was projected onto boomers, and they seemingly believed it. Unfortunately, boomers live in a fiat mindset nowadays. To be crystal clear about it here, not all boomers live this way. There is a small subsect of boomers who actually do not live in a fiat mindset. To them, everything is in fiat. Now, after my thoughts on this, I did some research. Yes, I did use an AI that was accused of Generation Z groveling. I made sure it did not do that. This is an exaggerated divide. Boomers tend to get along very well with Zoomers as long as we learn from each other. The ones who don't are politicians who are boomers, likely who want Zoomers to be deleted from existence due to our noticing of their disgusting actions. This divide is stemmed from differences in preferences, from communication, of which us Zoomers prefer digital, non-formal, to where boomers prefer physical and formal communication, even politics, since us Zoomers notice a lot of things wrong, not just with politics, even the economy. Well, all economies are fake. We don't need economies. Life experience. Yes, we do lose out on that one. As Zoomers, that is. And technology usage. Now, Jack does want a very Zoomer thing. Brief messages, brief answers. And yes, that is a Zoomer thing. I get it, okay? It's this weird kind of era between Gen X and Gen Y or Millennial. And yet this seems to be more boomer focused Generation X rather than really millennial focused Gen X, at least as far as I'm aware. Now, that said, this divide is based upon broad generalizations that are not true. In extreme cases, though, that's the exception, not the rule. Not every Zoomer is naturally opposed to every boomer. This is not an absolute. Not like what I explained in bonus episode 2 or bonus episode 9, which is the absolute truth about the self. If anything, Gen X might have some beef with us Zoomers, but the boomers and Zoomers, we can get along pretty well as long as we are able to properly quash the beef. Now, that is going to be it here for this episode. Each and every episode releases every Wednesday, provided there are no scheduling conflicts, or I can change those, from 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And it's always been 4 p.m. Pacific Time. Regardless, you can listen to this podcast on Wavelake, on Fountain, YouTube, actually just YouTube if you want the video versions that are just audio only or something like that. It doesn't matter. I hadn't done this podcast in a while. Regardless, you can listen to this podcast on YouTube. The bonus episodes are on Wavelake if you want to take a look at those. And not only that, just get the RSS feed YouTube site into the description below. And then post that to any podcast player you wish. It'll be just fine right there. Regardless, I am out of time for today's episode. Thank you, and good night.